What's good, guys? I'm going to be breaking down a sample of mine called Your Heart, and this is a really eerie, dark and ambient sample, and it sounds like this. Now, you'd be surprised how simple this sample actually is. I'm going to show you all the layers and plugins that I used and why I used them and how I easily achieved this sound. So let's get into it. So this is the intro. So this whole sample really started from this one vocal phrase. It was a free pack that Evil put out around Christmas time, and this was the vocal without any effects on it. It sounds like this. Now I time stretched it to match the tempo, which is 117, and then I just sound shifted it and I pitched it up 3 semitones. I added some multi-band compression and just a bit of EQ, just cutting out some of the harsher frequencies. And then all I did was take that same vocal phrase and I pitched it down 5. This will almost always work in your samples. If you have a melody or a chord progression, you can always do a B section or second part where you just take that same melody or same chord progression and just pitch it down 5 semitones. It almost always works, and you can even pitch it up 5, but generally pitching it down almost always gives it a nice sounding progression. So together they sound like this. And then from that same kit, I took this percussive loop, which without any plugin sounds like this. So just a small chop, and I'd obviously time stretched it again to match the tempo. I pitched it accordingly, and all I did was add some halftime, just adjusting the band at the bottom so there was still some of the original low end, and with that it sounds like this. And then I took one more element from the same kit, and this was a drum sound which without any plugin sounds like this. And then I just chopped it at the end. And I sound shifted it, added halftime, just doing the same thing, just taking off some of the lower end of the band, and then added Cymatic's Origin, which just kind of cut out a lot of the highs here, as you can see, and just gave it some kind of saturation and wobbly texture to it. And then I just EQ'd a lot of the lows out because I'm going to introduce the bass, and I didn't want this to interfere. So both the percussion and the drum loop together sound like this. And that's really the backbone or rhythm of this whole sample. And because it's such a simplistic sample, you really only have the vocals and the percussion here. And the synth bass was a Scorch preset called Down Yonder, and it was in the pad section actually, but I pitched it down and this was the pattern that I played. So those last little high notes just, I think, gives such a cool edge to this sample. And what I did was I bounced that out, and all I did was just use some multi-band compression just to boost some of the lows and just kind of tighten and compress them, and then just EQ'd out some of those lows and boosting again around the same area using the mid rather than the stereo or sides, just so it didn't sound too washy or muddy in the low end. Because the sample is in quite a low pitch as well, it's easy to have a very muddy bass. So just that little bit of compression and tightening up, cutting out some of the lows as well, just help tidy it up. So leading into the next section, it sounds like this. So it's a very dark and dreary sounding section. And so the first layer here is another vocal phrase which I took from Phantom 808. It was from his Cremona multi-kit. And I basically had chopped up all these like almost eighths or sixteenths, whatever it is, and then I just reversed pretty much all of it. I sound shifted it. I added some of the UAD compressor. I added some UAD Pultec EQ, just cutting out a lot of the lows. And then I used the Fab Filter EQ as well, cutting out a lot of the lows and just cutting out some of the harsher frequencies. And then I added Portal using the fourth shape pan just to give it a chop texture. So altogether it sounds like this. So I could definitely hear some like Travis Scott type drums, just something very ambient and psychedelic and dark sounding. It's just a really hard phrase, so I love that one. And this was originally a Diva preset. I've gone over this preset before. This is the IW Jupiter Synth Brass 4 from the Ingo Widener kit in Diva. And all I had was some reverb on it with a pretty high mix and some delay, just the stock Logic one. And this was the pattern that I played. So I'd just been messing around on the keyboard and recorded that in. And then what I did was I bounced that out. Now I did quite a bit of processing to this, and what I did initially was just added some halftime, again cutting out some of the band at the end. Then I used this Emergence plugin, which is kind of a delay kind of guitar pedal plugin, and also reversed it a little bit on here. It just gave it a really crazy texture. And then I used the UAD Pultec EQ, not really cutting out many of the lows, but just more for the flavor or sound of the EQ, which I really like. And then added some multi-band compression, which, because this layer took up such a wide frequency range as you heard in the original source file with the MIDI, I just ducked a lot of the lower end and even the mids, just because that's where the vocals are sitting and the synth bass is sitting, and also even the percussion. So just being very mindful of that so things aren't clashing. So then I actually added more EQ here, where I did cut out more of the lows up to about 250 hertz, and then added even more EQ, cutting around 200 as well. And then I just chopped it up like this, same with this vocal phrase, and then I just reversed it all and got this. So very repetitive, it's very ambient, and it's really just a layer that sets the tone in this sample. And then we just have the same synth bass layer, the same percussive element and the drum phrase there. And all I did was just cut the percussive element right at the end here as the synth bass did that high note, and then it transitions into the drum element. So it just broke it up nicely, and then transitioning into the next section, this is what it sounds like. So I didn't actually change too much here, but what I've done, and I do this quite often as a way of just getting a whole new section out of the sounds I've already used, I took that same synth layer here and I just chopped it like this, and then taken the vocal layers and the percussive element, and then I just bounced them out and added halftime to them and just some EQ just to cut out a lot of the lows, a lot of the highs. And then I did pretty much the same thing with the vocal texture, except I just reversed it, added halftime and just some multi-band compression stuff, again ducking a lot of those unnecessary frequencies. So the synth texture sounds like this. So pretty much just repeating the same chops, the same notes. And all I did here was just take that original vocal chop and reversed it, this one. And then I just layered that with the one below. Then I just bounced them out together and added halftime, added compression, added the Pultec EQ, cutting out some of the lows, added multi-band compression, ducking a lot of frequencies because this vocal layer became quite muddy from the halftime. Same as the synth texture, which I'd added halftime to. I just ducked a lot of the frequencies using the multi-band compressor and adding EQ, kind of doing the same. And this was very much in the range where not only were there harsh frequencies, but it was clashing with the other layers. And then I added more EQ, just cutting up to about 500 hertz. Then I just got this guitar phrase, which was from S. Lyers, a Soul Hue one-shot kit, and this is what it sounded like after I time stretched it a little bit, and I pitched it up to match the project and added some of the Magic Switch plugin, which gone over this plugin. It's a free plugin and it kind of just gives like a chorusy, almost like a flangery type of effect, and I just love this on guitars, especially acoustic guitars. So I had just taken this phrase and then I chopped it right at the end and went up 8 semitones, so together they sound like this. And so I bounced that out and again did a lot of processing, just adding more EQ, cutting out a lot of the lows, added some compression again. I used the Emergence plugin, which was, I'm pretty sure, the same settings as I'd used on the last layer before, and added quite a lot of halftime using the quarter note preset. Added the fourth shape pan from Portal to give it that quarter note chop, and then Pultec EQ again, just cutting out even more lows, just getting that sound that the EQ has, and added some more multi-band compression, and then some Pancake, which I'd kind of just messed around with it, but just so that it was moving around a lot, especially considering a lot of the other layers were quite low and just mid-focused and literally in the middle of this sample. So it just kind of helped the guitar keep moving around and making the sample dynamic and not clashing as much with the other sounds in this section. So it's just a very kind of rugged sound to it, so I really like that. And then just transitioning into the second last section here for the outro. So nothing really new here other than arrangement. I had taken out this vocal layer, obviously not using the half-timed ones anymore because that was more of a bridge section, and just using these synth chops, and then just having the percussive elements just chopped slightly. So see, just having these percussive elements just kind of coming in here and there, and then just keeping the drums in, the guitars continuing. And then into this section, the only thing I did differently was obviously reintroduce the synth bass, but I took that vocal from earlier and I just reversed it. It just sounded really cool, and it was just an easy way to create variation. And then that's just a nice transition into the outro. So yeah, just reintroducing that vocal phrase from earlier that I chopped and reversed, and then same with the synth layer and the bass, taking out all the drum and percussive sounds, just so it's kind of a breakdown and just a variation, so that if a producer does use a sample, you know, there's a lot of different parts that they can cut and use, where maybe they want the bass, maybe they don't want the bass, and either way I always have the stems included at the end as well. And the final thing, and I admit I've been bad at not showing this because I just forget, truthfully, on the master channel I'd pitched this down 2 semitones, and I noticed that using multi-band compression, especially on the master, makes a big difference in terms of just helping glue frequency ranges together. So just again tightening, compressing that low end and ducking some of the muddier frequencies and the sort of low mids, the mids, and just boosting some of the highs, but using the expand setting here, so it just kind of widens the high end. And then I use some EQ, cutting out a lot of the lows again, because I had also pitched this sample down. It was just a lot muddier sounding, so just making sure there's not a bunch of unnecessary sound and volume coming from the low end, cutting out some of the harsher frequencies, boosting the ones that I liked, and boosting some of that high end again. And then this is my preset that I use on Wave's ARTG mastering plugin, and I absolutely love this plugin. I use it on all my masters, and it just, here's the difference with and without, just during the intro. So without, So it just helps make it a lot louder, to be honest. And I didn't even really boost the input, but you know, it has an EQ on it. It's got a limiter as well. And I just kind of made it a bit more stereo rather than being a super wide mix here on the spreader and down here as well, as you can see. And then I just added a stock Logic limiter at the end, which I always do, just to make sure it's never going above minus 0.2. So that just ensures that the track is never clipping or going above 0 decibels. So, but yeah, if you want to purchase this sample or any other ones like it from me, then you can check out my store, blueinfinity.store, and you can go to my Instagram as well, which is blueinfinitysamples. Feel free to shoot me a message there, or my email's in the description otherwise if you want to collaborate or work with me. And yeah, shout out to Evil or Evil. His YouTube channel is awesome. He does really great sample making tutorials as well. I take a lot of inspiration and learn a lot from him, and this sample wouldn't have been created without the phrases that he had put out in his recent kit. So definitely check him out as well, and until then, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Bye.